everyone. I'm Abigail. This is Bella, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. Today we are joined by New York Times best-selling author Jessica Day George. Ms. George has written the books Silver in the Blood, Sun and Moon, Ice and Snow, the 12 Dancing Princesses trilogy, the Rose Legacy trilogy, the Dragon Slippers trilogy, and of course, the Tuesdays at the Castle series. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is super fun.
We have talked to a number of authors who have written retold fairy tales, including Liesl Shirtliff, Gregory Maguire, and Salman Chinani. Mr. Chinani loves the original Little Mermaid and is not a fan of the Disney version.
Ooh.
Do you agree, or are you the opposite?
With The Little Mermaid? Oh, I can't stand the original story. I think Hans Christian Andersen was a terrible person, and I do not like any of his stories. And my mom's family is from Denmark, and I've been there, and I've seen the Little Mermaid statue and all the stuff, and I'm like, this story is so horrible. I think the endings of so many of his stories are so mean. He wrote The Little Match Girl and she dies. And, he wrote The Red Shoes and they have to cut her feet off and just awful stuff. I am a big fan of Ariel singing and getting to win the prince in the end. I'm a big fan of that. I like my happy ever afters.
Is there extra pressure when retelling a fairy tale knowing there is already a fan base who could get upset?
There is. I didn't know this at first. And I was kind of lucky because my very first fairy tale retelling was Sun and Moon, Ice and Snow. And it's a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is a Norwegian fairy tale. And not a lot of people know it. It was always my favorite as a kid. I had a picture book of it, but it's very similar to Beauty and the Beast, except he's a polar bear by day and a person at night, but she can't ever see him at night. And anyway, I love that. I've always loved that story. So I did that one. And because not a lot of people knew it, people were just like, oh, this is so clever, except once or twice, there are other versions out there, like East by Edith Patu and Ice by Sarah Beth Durst and stuff. And so occasionally I would get people going like, oh, you copied East or something. And I would go, no, our versions are quite different. But it's a fairy tale. But then I wrote the 12 Dancing Princesses. I wrote Princess and Midnight Ball, and a lot more people knew that one. And it was really funny because a lot of people, yes, have very strong opinions, but it's about weird things. It was about weird things. I get weird complaints. I get complaints because all of the sisters are named, because, in the fairy tale, they're not named. They're just like the princesses, right? So I decided that they should all be flower names. And I had someone give me a really bad review and write this whole thing on her blog about how wrong I was because there are 12 sisters, but there are more than 12 flowers in the world. And so obviously I should have named the sisters January, February, March, because there's 12 months. And so she could not concentrate on the story after that. And it was the weirdest criticism ever. But so you get people that are very opinionated about weird little details. Like I did Princess of the Silver Woods, which is one of the 12 dancing princesses, is basically Little Red Riding Hood. And the guy in it, though, who is the wolf, they're actually called wolves. They're like bandits in the forest who wear wolf masks. And he's a good guy. And I made him sort of a Robin Hood character where he's actually stealing from people who can afford it to help the people in the forest who don't have any money. And people got actually really mad that I combined a German fairy tale and a British myth. They were like, you're not supposed to put those together. You can't just have a fairy tale and then have somebody was like, what is next? Cinderella meets King Arthur. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So they get mad about weird things, but I love fairy tales and I want to do the best version of them that I can. So I'm like, well, I did my best job. And if you didn't like it, you can write your own.
What do you think the biggest key to retelling a fairy tale or any public domain story?
The key thing is, I don't even know. I wouldn't say you have to love that story, but you have to love what you want to tell about that story. Does that make sense? Because I know people that have retold fairy tales that they didn't like because they wanted to make it have a happy ending, like The Little Mermaid or something like that, right? So I think you have to like respect the source material, not go like, oh, The Little Mermaid's stupid, so I'm going to change everything, because then it's not The Little Mermaid. So you have to go, okay, these are the good points of The Little Mermaid, right? These are the things that The Little Mermaid, that's why it's still a classic story that's still around, that some people really love. So these are the things that I need to like respectfully use in my story. But you have to be like, I want to tell this story my way, and here is why. And you have to really love that idea. Like, I am going to tell The Little Mermaid this way, or I'm going to tell the 12 dancing princesses, and they're saved by their gardener who knits them a magic boat. And I put knitting into that one, and stuff like that. I think I really wanted to do something like that. I wanted to tell that story, and this is the way I wanted to tell it. And you have to really want to tell that story. It's just the same as any other book. You have to really want to tell the story you're writing just the way, like your own way, because you have to spend a lot of time working on it to make it right. And if you don't love it, and if you aren't really excited to tell your story, it's not going to be very good.
Did you watch
fun to read.
Did you watch the Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers movie? It has a bunch of fairy tale characters in it.
Yes, it does. I was not expecting Peter Pan, I have to say.
Yeah. Why do you think people love fairy tales? And what is your favorite?
People love fairy tales because, and this is something that I have actually taught like classes about, and things for people who want to do fairy tale retellings. They are classic stories that are still around because pretty much every single one of them is an underdog story. Do you know what an underdog is? It's like the picked on person, like Cinderella. Oh, they make her work as the maid and everything. But in the end, she wins. She gets the happy ever after. She gets the prince, right? That's why I have trouble with The Little Mermaid, because she is an underdog. She's the youngest sister, and there's all these horrible conditions for her to go to the surface and stuff like that. And she doesn't win. I'm like, that I don't like that. But but most other fairy tales, like the classic, the old stories, East of the Sun, which is like thousands of years old, Cinderella, there's a Cinderella story, like all over the world. There's all different, every culture has sort of a Cinderella story. Beauty and the Beast type of stories and stuff. They're all about someone who's like sort of picked on, they're overlooked. And everyone's out to get him, but in the end they win. They get to become a princess or a prince, or they were under a curse and their curse goes away. And every person, I don't care how nice your life is, every person feels like an underdog, at least at some point. I mean, I grew up with a lovely family, very nice house, and I would like lay on the floor and cry because my mom was so mean and she used to make me dust the whole house. It was so awful. So I'm like, I'm just like Cinderella. When will my prince come? So every person feels like that. So it's very satisfying to read a story where, you can really sympathize with the main character. Like, yes, these horrible things are happening to them. I know exactly what that feels like. I've totally been under a curse my whole life and I'm turned into a terrible monster. Just look at me, like everybody's felt like that sometimes. And then to read a story where that happens and then the person wins and they win the prince and they get to live in the castle and everything is great and beautiful and they have treasure and all those things. It's very satisfying to read about that. So that's why those are still so popular. There's all kinds of stories too, where especially in like Northern Europe, like Norway and Sweden and stuff, there's lots of the stories are called Askeladden stories. He's like the hero of a lot of the fairy tales. And it literally means like Cinderella boy. Like Askeladden means like ash lad. And so he's like the poor youngest son who doesn't have any inheritance or anything. And the older brothers are mean to him. And then he always goes off to get a job or make his own way in the world. And he always ends up like defeating a troll and finding a treasure and marrying a princess. And he does it because he's a good person and he's smart. And so it was like, he doesn't have any money. He's not educated or anything, but he wins in the end because he has a good heart and he's really clever. And so that's like a really popular thing because every person thinks, no one thinks I'm dumb all the time. Every person wants to think that they're a good person and wants to think that they're clever. And so you read those stories and you think, oh, that could be me. I could do that. So that's really why my favorite fairy tale is East of the Sun, is the polar bear Beauty and the Beast. That's my all-time favorite. I love it so much. So it has everything. It has trolls in it. It has witches. It has monsters and treasure, everything.
You also have a lot of amazing original stories. Where did the idea of the Tuesdays at the Castle series come from?
Well, it came from a place where a lot of stories come from. I was very tired. When you are very tired, sometimes your brain starts, thinking weird, crazy thoughts. So I was very tired one night and I wanted to go to bed, but first I had to, brush my teeth and put my pajamas on and I couldn't, I wear glasses, I wear contacts or glasses. And as soon as I take my contacts out at night, I have to grab my glasses because I cannot see anything. And I couldn't find my glasses and I was like running around like, who moved my glasses? Like stuff in the house is just missing and it's going to take me so long to get ready for bed and I'm so tired. And all of a sudden I thought, what if the house was playing a trick on me? Like, what if our house was like mad at me because I don't clean it enough or something like that? And so my house played a trick on me and like, I couldn't find my pajamas. And then my husband's like, they're in the wash. And I was just like, I don't have pajamas. I don't have glasses. The house hates me. And I just thought, what if you lived in a castle? And I loved stories to read books that were called things when I was a kid, like The Enchanted Palace or The Magic Castle or something. I was always excited by that title. But then every time you'd read them, it wasn't that the castle was magic. The castle was just a regular castle, but a wizard lived in it. So, and I was always a little bit disappointed that it had nothing to do with the castle. It's just because there was a wizard living in it. So I thought, what if your castle was actually magic? What if you actually lived in a magic house or a magic castle? Because I've always wanted to live in a castle. But what if you lived in a magic castle and the castle got mad at you or moved rooms around because it got bored? Or what happens if the castle gets sick? Or if someone attacks a magic castle, like how does the castle fight back? Does it throw its own stones at you and stuff? And I was sitting in bed and I just thought, what if you lived in a magic castle? Like, what if these things happened to you and stuff? And I pulled out a notebook because I always keep a notebook at my bedside table for this very reason. And started writing it. And I was telling my husband, like, I think our house is magic and it moved my pajamas and my glasses. And he's like, you're wearing your glasses and your pajamas are in the wash. And I'm like, don't care. Got a good book idea. But I still don't know where my glasses came from. So I maintain that the house was hiding them from me and then gave them back.
Yeah.
There are two places where book ideas come from. You're really tired or you're in the shower. Because like, unless you're really new to showering, think about it. Unless you're really new to showering, like you're not thinking washing my hair, washing my arm, right? You're thinking you're in the shower and you're just like, no. You're singing a song and then you start thinking things like, do werewolves use dog shampoo? Do like, for a while I used that mane and tail shampoo that's supposed to be for horses. So, but no one ever said you smell like a clean horse, but like dog shampoo really smells like dog shampoo, And I thought, what if you could tell that your friend was a werewolf because they always smelled like dog shampoo. And then one time they got wet and they smelled like wet dog. And you were like, wait a minute, you're a werewolf. Those are shower thoughts. I've gotten some of my book ideas from the shower. 12 Dancing Princesses and Princess of Glass. So Princess of the Midnight Ball and Princess of Glass, I was in the shower both times. When I'm like, oh, what if I retold that fairy tale, but it was like this? washing my hair. Oh, what if I done? So yeah, either you're really tired, so your brain starts doing tricky things for you, or you're in the shower and your brain is bored.
Tuesday at the Castle has 5 books now. Will we ever get a Sunday and Monday?
Probably not. I had ideas for something, but that I just don't even want to talk about because I don't want to get anyone's hopes up. But I have so many other books that I want to do first that I don't know when I would get back to that. And if by the time I got back to those stories, if people would care, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I kind of feel like too, after all they went through, and it was like 3 years, 5 books, all the awful things that happened to their family, they kind of deserve a break.
Let's talk about dragon.
Did you have to do a lot of dragon research before writing Dragon Slippers?
No, because I have been doing dragon research all my life. I have been collecting dragons since I was 4 years old.
May I ask, is that a dragon behind you?
You
Like in the
mean
back corner? Yeah.
Gorbash back there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you have the peace dragon. She has a peace dragon.
Nice.
What's the peace dragon?
So that green dragon with the yellow wings, we call
Yes.
that the peace dragon. It's at our school. We have 2 of them.
Yeah,
Oh, but the big guy is Gorbash. I've had him since before I had kids. I got him when I was about 20. He has a little saddle on him that you can ride on. Yep. I have dragons all over my office. This is as a ride there and stuff. And then if you've ever seen the Sword in the Stone, it's Madame Mim when she's a dragon, and I keep them on my desk. So I've been collecting dragons since I was 4 years old. This little bendy guy I've had since I was a kid. My dad's company randomly made these weird little toys one year with like their product name on it. And it's like a chemical that you put on bugs. It's like a bug killing chemical. And they made these little dragon toys and he gave them to me. Anyway, so when I was 4, my parents went to Walt Disney World and they didn't take any of their beloved children with them. So they went by themselves for a week and left us with our grandma for a whole week. And they brought us back each a present, and they brought me a stuffed Figment. I have him. He's upstairs. He's about this high. And a t-shirt, because the original Figment ride, it was Figment and Dream Finder. It was someone who takes the power of imagination and makes dreams, was the original ride, with Figment of Imagination, his sidekick. And he had bright red hair. And since I have red hair and I'm the only one in the family, my mom was always looking for red-headed toys for me. Like I had tons of strawberry shortcakes, but none of her friends and things like that. And Annie dolls and all those things. But so she brought me a stuffed Figment and then a t-shirt with Dreamfinder on it. And I did not care about a red-headed man in a top hat. Mom, like that was on my t-shirt, but I did care about the dragon and I got super into dragons. So actually, like that whole bottom shelf there by the dragons and by the mom from Brave as a bear to leaning against the dragon, that is all picture books about dragons that I've collected over the years, that whole bottom shelf there. And so yeah, this is my office bookshelves. These are just my favorite books. And I have dragons everywhere, all kinds of dragons from all over the world. I've collected books about different mythology, about dragons, and all kinds of stories about dragons and mini movies about dragons and stuff like that. So when I wrote Dragon Slippers, I was like, I've been preparing for this my whole life. So
writing isn't easy, and rejection seems to be a part of most writers' stories. Can you tell us about that part of your journey?
yes. I will happily talk about that because it was awful and I hope no one else ever has to do it. I got rejected a lot. I got rejected for the first 9 years I was trying to get a book published. 9 years. And I wrote 7 books during that time. And every one of them got rejected over and over again. I have over 200 rejection letters in a scrapbook that I actually put away in a closet just before I started the Zoom call. So I'm not going to dig it out and show you. It's ugly. Anyway, but here's the thing. Here's the reason why I was rejected. None of those books was Dragon Slippers. None of those books was Tuesdays at the Castle or Sun and Moon. When I was 11 and in 5th grade, I decided that I was going to be a writer. because I read The Hero and the Crown by Robin McKinley, which is about a red-headed princess who goes out to slay dragons, and she defeats an evil wizard, and she has a horse. So I read this book that had a red-headed girl on the cover with a magic glowing sword, and she was fighting a dragon, and I read this book, and her horse didn't die, and she fought an evil wizard, and she fought an evil dragon, and all this stuff, and it was so cool. And I found out that, and I was like, well, first I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, it's like this person has been listening to my dreams and my daydreams, because I make up stories like this in my head all the time. I love to daydream about, like, if I lived in a castle, if I rode a unicorn to school, or, you know, if I met a real dragon, if it's a nice dragon, is it a mean dragon, you know? And I'm like, wow, somebody took my daydreams and wrote them down. And there was a little, you know, bio of her at the back, which was kind of unusual. A lot of kids' books, especially like the older ones, they're just like, here is the book, kids, you know, you didn't care about the author. But I was so into the book that I looked, and at the end, there is a little biography of the author, and I realized that her whole job was just writing stories. And her first book that had come out before The Hero and the Crown was Beauty, and it was a version of Beauty and the Beast. And I'm like, that's a thing you can do? You can take a fairy tale and turn it into like a full-length novel, and they'll pay you to do that? I was so excited. So I found out that was a job you could have in 5th grade, and I decided that was going to be my job. But when I grew up and I went to college and stuff, and I worked at a bookstore for several years, and I realized that pretty much the exact same books I'd read as a kid, if they were fantasy books, like with dragons and wizards and the stuff that I wanted to write, they were the same books. There were no new ones. And I thought, well, great, then I'll write a new one. And I had people tell me, oh, nobody reads stuff like that anymore. So if it's not like an old classic, like the Narnia books or the Wizard of Oz or something, nobody will publish it, because kids' books today are all supposed to be about like serious real world topics. And I'm like, that sounds terrible. So I stopped trying to write kids' books. And what was really popular when I first started trying to write a book or get a book published was like grown-up books that were like set in the real world, like murder mysteries and stuff, but they had magic in them. And they're called urban fantasy. And it was really, really popular when I got started. And so I started trying to write for grown-ups so that I could be really popular. Because I thought, well, if I want to get a book published and be popular and be a famous author, I guess that's the kind of book I have to write. So I wrote 7 books that are for grown-ups, and they're not good. And I got rejected a ton of times. And some of the rejections were like, your main character is so whiny. I was hoping that she got killed. And then when she didn't, I was mad. And I was like, oh, what? And like, but I got some good rejections too. I got some good rejections like, this is a really good story idea, and you write really well, but I don't believe your main character is a grown-up. They sound more like they're about 15 years old. So if you made her a 15-year-old who's like, like a wizard, but she's also solving this mystery. So sort of like a witch Nancy Drew. I had this guy send me this letter. It's like, if it was like a witch Nancy Drew type of thing, that would be so cool. It would fit your story so much better. But I don't publish children's books, so I don't know how to help you. So bye, good luck. So I got rejections that basically told me I sounded like I was trying to write for kids, but I wasn't. And then I got some that were just like, this is just terrible. So when I came up with the idea for Dragon Slippers, I had just been rejected for like the 200th time. And I just suddenly was like, I just want to write a book. I just had a baby, and I just thought, I just want to write a book that will be for my family, that will be something fun. Because none of my books that I was writing, weren't fun, because books just weren't fun for grown-ups then either. Like everybody had to die at the end in order to save the world, that kind of thing. And like they were always being murdered. It was terrible. So I was trying to write these like really serious books, and I just didn't like it. So I thought, I have this really fun idea for a book about this girl who meets these dragons, and they collect things just the way I collect dragons. And, why should dragons hoard gold? They can't spend the coins in a shop because they're too big. They can't drink out of gold goblets because they're too big. Like, so who says they don't like other stuff and collect other stuff? I thought that would be so funny if you went into a dragon's cave and thought, I'm going to steal some gold, like Bilbo in The Hobbit or something. And then you get in there and it's like, he has 1,000,000 dogs and no gold, or something, or like a huge library of books. This is amazing. It's a library, So I thought this is such a fun idea. It will only work if it's like a younger girl. It will not work if it's a grown up too, because at the very beginning of Dragon Slippers, her family basically decides to like sacrifice her to the local dragon because they have too many mouths to feed. So they're like, we're going to go up and chain her to the cave and give her to the local dragon and get rid of this girl we don't want. And so if you're a grown-up lady and your family's like, we're going to chain you to a cave, you're like, see ya, bye, I'll just go, But if you're younger, if you're a kid, you can't always say that, right? So they take her up there and the dragon doesn't care or want to eat her. He's old. And and he likes shoes instead of gold. So at least she gets a nice pair of shoes out of this deal. But so I came up with this idea and I thought this would be so fun. And I think it would be really funny to put like my dog in it with the one dragon that collects dogs. My dog is one of the dogs prominently featured in that book. And my sister's dog is also prominently featured in that book. And I just thought I'm going to write this for fun, just for my family, because I was so tired of being rejected. I just thought, I'm clearly not a very good author. But my family still loves me. So I'll just write little stories for my family. So I tried just writing a book for my family, but I was so excited about my story that I told everyone that talked to me. I went to my book club and the book we were supposed to read was dumb and nobody had finished it. And so instead I just told them all about Dragon Slippers that I was working on at the time. And they said it was much better than the stupid book we were supposed to read for book club and stuff. So the only two people that like publishing people that I told Dragon Slippers to, like told them about, what did that work? Told about Dragon Slippers. That didn't work. Yeah, that worked. The first and only two people that I went to and said, I've written a book about a girl and these talking dragons and they collect these different things and she accidentally starts a war between the dragons and the people. And they immediately, instead of saying, no, this is terrible, I want your main character to die, she's so whiny, like all those other things I was used to hearing, they were like, oh, that sounds so good. Oh, that sounds so fun. Oh, you clearly are like so excited about this story. I really want to read it. And so nobody ever rejected Dragon Slippers. Nobody's ever rejected any of my 16 books now. As soon as I started writing for kids, like I'd always wanted to, that's really what the difference was, is I was trying to write things I thought would be popular instead of writing things that I was excited about. And also when I write, my main characters naturally feel like they're maybe 12 to 17 years old, somewhere in that range, always. And so as soon as I start writing a book, like as soon as I think of a story idea, my brain always thinks like, so this is a 16-year-old or this is a 12-year-old. And my first few books, I would think, okay, so this is a 15-year-old. And then I go, nope, it has to be a grown-up because that's what people like. And so I would say, okay, so she's 25 instead of 15, but it didn't sound right coming from me. I'm not good at that. So you have to find the thing that you're actually good at in your writing. If you're like, I just love nonfiction books about sharks and I just want to write facts about sharks or facts about dinosaurs or something like that, you're like, oh, well, nobody cares about dinosaurs but me, so instead I'm going to write a romance novel. It's not going to be as good as if you just went ahead and wrote about dinosaur facts.
After 9 years of rejection, can you tell us exactly where you were and what your reaction was when you first found out that you were a New York Times best-selling author?
Oh, yes. I will never forget that because I was on a Disney cruise and no one could get a hold of me because we were at sea. And so we got to a port where we could get emails and texts and things, and my phone started just buzzing and vibrating and my laptop started dinging and all this stuff, and we were like, oh my gosh, no, what's happened? Because my husband and I had gone for our anniversary. Wednesdays in the Castle had come out, Wednesdays in the Tower had come out like the week before. So we had like a week. I'd gone on tour, done some things, and then we went on a cruise over our anniversary. Our wedding anniversary was that week. And we left my kids with my parents. And so we were like assuming that one of our kids had been like terribly hurt or something like that. And because my sixth grader was only a year and a half at the time. Old. He was only a year and a half old. And so we were like freaking out. But I look, and all my texts, none of them are from my mom or anything. All of my texts were from my agent, from my editor, from the CEO of my publisher. And I'm like, what has happened? It didn't even occur to me that I would and I had all these missed calls, but they were all from New York. And I was like, what is happening? And I saw so I looked from my agent because, you know, we're very close and stuff. And she was like, Jessica, pick up your phone. Jessica, pick up your phone. And she's like, oh, right, you're on a cruise. So I had all these texts like, pick up your phone, pick up your phone. And then it's like, oh, you're on a cruise. You're on a cruise. Can you hear me now? Cruise. And then she finally goes, Jessica, you're on the New York Times bestseller list. Call me when you get this. And I dropped my phone on the floor and I like fell back on the couch. And I'm like, I felt like my arms went numb. I thought, am I having a heart attack? Because I just went like, and my husband was like, what is it? Which of the kids like broke a leg or something like that? And I'm like, I just like point to my phone like, no. And he picks it up and he's like, oh, okay, nobody's hurt. And I'm like, nobody's hurt. So that was we were just glad nobody was hurt. But and then I started crying. I was so excited. And then when we came off the cruise, and I had talked to everybody that I needed to talk to and stuff like that, and got off the cruise, and I went home for less than a day, and then flew out to do the next part of my book tour. I was just like, oh, I guess we carry on. And places where I went, like schools that I talked at and stuff, had put New York Times bestseller, like made little posters and all this stuff for me. And I was just like, I would like stand up to give an assembly and I would start crying like, yes, I'm a New York Times bestseller. I'm such a boob. It was so amazing. And it's only happened that one time so far, but it really was so amazing. So I'm sure there are some people who are like, yeah, whatever, it happens to me every time or something like that. But some of us think we're dying because it's so cool.
We've interviewed a number of authors who have had books banned, which means that many kids won't have the access to the same books we do, and possibly not see themselves represented in books. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yes, it's bad. Everyone should have a book. You know, that's like what I was saying with, you know, when you hear a fairy tale and you think, oh, I felt like that. But sometimes it's a huge stretch. And you shouldn't have to stretch all the time to feel like the main character, like, oh, this person's, you know, skin is different from mine. Everything about them is different. So it's kind of a stretch, but I guess, you know, I also, you know, am in fifth grade or something like that. So we've got that. When you find a book where you're like, this person looks like me, this person thinks like me, or this person grew up like me, it is so important. And so I really feel like there should be every kind of book for every kind of person. I'm so thrilled that there are starting to be more and more books by people. I'm a white Christian lady from Idaho. You know, any book I picked up as a kid were basically about me, unless it was a boy, you know. And I was so fascinated though whenever I picked up a book where the main character wasn't exactly like me. It was so interesting to me. And so every person deserves to have that. And I love that my kids are now growing up in a time when they can pick up books and read about different people and not just people like them, and where people that don't look like us can pick up books and see themselves in books. It's so very important, and everyone needs access to books. We need more money for libraries. We need more money for school libraries. We need more programs that put books in the hands of kids, because there are a lot of things that science has proven that, first of all, reading fiction and reading about people who look differently from you creates more empathy. So you become a more empathetic person. You're less likely to like grow up and be like a horrible racist person if you've read a lot of books about other types of people. My mom did not like Judy Blume's books that were for older teens. She thought they were too naughty for me. So like other than Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Iggy's House, I wasn't allowed to read Judy Blume's books. Like Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Super Fudge, I could read and nothing else. And so, of course, I sat in the school library and read every single one of those. But our library didn't have all of them. And so I would ask, like, well, could you get it in? And they're like, no, we don't want, we don't have the budget for that, or they're older, we're getting some new books in and stuff like that. And I wanted to read them so bad. So I didn't read all of Judy Blume's books until I was a grown-up who had a car and money and access to other libraries and stuff. And so that's what's so hard is, some kids need these books now. And if they're not in the library because they've been taken out of the libraries, like they're too hard to find for kids, or you don't just stumble across them. Like, have you ever just randomly found a book? Like I found The Hero and the Crown. I didn't know what it was, but I was looking for a book to do a book report on and saw a book that had a redheaded girl on the cover because it was there on the shelf in my classroom in 5th grade. And that's how I found that book. And there's lots of people that are just going to, see themselves suddenly on the cover of a book and be so excited. Excuse me, there's a little, is it a bug? Is it yarn fluff? We don't know. Anyway, sorry, I'm not crazy. There was something floating past me. But you cannot find that book that you need if it's not there. And so it's very important that we have all these different voices, different people writing books about different kinds of people. And it's very important that we get those in the hands of kids. So those are my thoughts.
You studied Old Norse.
I did.
What Norse god or figure will we eventually get a Jessica Day George book of?
Well, I have been working on something for a long time that's almost ready, that is about a girl who lives in a house in Pocatello, which is based on a real house in Pocatello, Idaho, that I lived in, who discovers that the Norse gods, Odin, Loki, all of them, Freya, are using the weird closets and long dark hallways in her weird scary new house to get from place to place. And so she thinks they have ghosts in their house, but it's actually the Norse gods. And it turns out that their football coach at the middle school is actually one of the gods, and he delivers pizza on the weekends too, and keeps turning up at their house when they need him. And I actually have been working on something with another friend as well, Matt Kirby, who's written books like Icefall and Star Splitter and The Clockwork 3. And Matt is a huge Norse mythology geek too. And we have been working on something that would have Loki in it, but also Idun, who has the golden apples that make the Norse gods immortal. And we've been working on a story with those characters in it together to like write a book together for a long time. And Matt just sent me a thing the other day telling me about Thor's daughter, Thrish. Her name is Thrish. I'm going to change that a little bit so people can pronounce it. He apparently had a daughter who was one of the leaders of the Valkyries, that rode into battle on their winged horses and chose the heroes from battle and stuff like that. And I put her into my book as well in a surprising role. So I'm almost done with that. I'm very excited. It's called The North-South House. I never know if the titles are going to change, but right now it's called The North-South House. So, because I lived in a weird, creepy house in Pocatello for a while, and I've always wanted to write a book about it.
I've read those books.
Good.
Is there a fairy tale you have been wanting to retell and you haven't figured out how to do it yet?
I have been working on something for several years that has a bunch of fairy tales in it, and fairy tale characters. and sort of like, what if that was your real life, but like your mom was Cinderella and, you know, you knew Sleeping Beauty and stuff like that. I've always wanted to do Sleeping Beauty because the Disney movie is one of my favorite, and I love the Maleficent movies and all those things. And so I've been tinkering with something on that, and that is what I'm really working on right now. And so it has Snow White in it. It has a Little Mermaid type of character, just briefly, because I do like mermaids. It has an Aladdin character. They don't have quite the same names, but so I bring in like, basically like, what if you had a genie and you had unlimited wishes, but it was kind of a bad thing. Like you had to have control of this genie and you were afraid to make some of the wishes because they always turned out wrong. Like that kind of genie story. And there's Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, and all those characters are in it. Rapunzel, because I love Rapunzel stories. And so yeah, I'm working on that right now and throwing in all the ones that I've never really done. Also the Snow Queen, which is the one Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale I do like. Is the Snow Queen, where the Snow Queen takes the boy away and he has ice. It's what Frozen is based on, actually, is based on the fairy tale of the Snow Queen. But she puts ice into the boy's eye and then ice into his heart and takes him away. But it's a bad thing, and she wants to keep him for herself. And then the girl that's his sweetheart has to travel all the way, you know, to the top of the world and get her boyfriend back from the Snow Queen. And I've always really liked that story, and so I have like Snow Queen characters in this too. So all kinds of crazy stuff.
Finally, it's time for our Turbo 10.
10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Number 1, what is your favorite phrase to use?
What is my favorite phrase to use? It is, I tend to have too many people say, so because I use it a lot. I literally hate that. I literally hate that. And then I always end up taking it out, but yeah.
Number 2, what is the subject you would love to learn more about?
Oh, the Roman Empire occupying England.
Number 3, what is your go-to snack food?
I keep it in my office.
Number 4, what is your favorite book growing up?
I talked about The Hero and the Crown, and also before I found The Hero and the Crown, it was A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Love A Little Princess.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where do you go?
Iceland. Reykjavik, probably. Iceland.
Number 6, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I used to say flight, but I'm afraid of heights. So it is actually invisibility.
Number 7, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Dungeons and Dragons. Have you seen the new Dungeons and Dragons movie?
Yes, I reviewed it.
And they are in the maze. The other group that are in brightly colored clothes, those are the ones from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from when I was a kid that get trapped in that cage and they leave them there. I screamed. Anyway, okay, next.
Number 8, what is your favorite rainy day activity?
Reading a book.
Number 9, if you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
I would love to meet with Diana Wynne Jones, who wrote Howl's Moving Castle. I would love to have dinner with her and Neil Gaiman, who wrote Coraline. They were friends in real life before Diana's death, and they'd be so interesting to talk to together. And I would love to talk to Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre. I think they would be interesting dinner guests together, especially.
Number 10. What is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Write every day if you want to be a writer. For 10 minutes every day, you should write something because it keeps your writing muscles going. It keeps them nice and plump.
You were awesome. Thank you for doing that.
And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
We can't
Thanks for
wait
having
to read
me.
your future books.
Thank you.